Another useful piece of logic when you're dealing with assigning multiple systems controls to a single seat is how you convert the reset controls of the axes within the seats into the kind of sticky controls that you may need for a searchlight or for a water cannon. Now, the way that you do this is actually fairly simple. As you know, the axes on the seat generate a number between -1 and 1. So we have -1, 0, and 1 as the full numbers that we can check against. And these numbers can actually be used in the greater than and less than gates, respectively, to test against whether or not someone is actually pressing the button down and the number is moving towards either that -1 or that 1. The output of these gates, of the greater than and less than gates, is obviously a signal whether or not this condition, less than or greater than, is actually true. And this on signal can then be used in an up-down gate, which has an internal value similar to what you have on the seat that can be moved in either direction using these signals. However, in difference to the seat, this up-down gate here, in its normal form, has a sticky control. So whether or not these lines are on, the up-down gate will always stay at the last position that you moved it to. So if you turn it on, it will move towards 1, and then it'll hit 0.5, and it will stay there if you turn the on signal off. If you turn the other signal on, well, it will start to go down again. So that's what we have done here. So we're wiring, for example, our AD into a less than and greater than gate. Now, these gates need something to test against for the output signal to turn on or off. And what we're using for testing here is these two number blocks, and they are set to 0.1 and -0.1. Now, this is just outside of our actual dead zone, which is 0, which is not doing anything. Now, the reason that you want to have a number that isn't 0, that isn't testing just against nothing, is because when you release the key, it does not go back to 0 all the time. It either stays just a smidge above 0 or just a smidge below. So you always want to have a certain dead zone or a certain test that has a bit more lenience towards the dead zone of the seed itself. This is why we're using 0.1 and -0.1. Now, we'll wire these respectively into our gates, and I've done so for both the A and D and W and S here, and wired the gates into the up-down and then the up-down to a little searchlight. If we then spawn this and walk over to it, we can use the seat controls, which are set to reset, to actually keep the searchlight at the position that we want it to stay at, as you can see here. Now, you'll notice that it will move quite a bit if we press down these keys, because when we press the keys, the number actually starts increasing. So we go from 0 to 0.1 to 0.2 and so forth. And the time it takes to get to the 1, which is the final output that we can set, and the time it takes to go back below the threshold that we set, this is our delay that we can build into this. Now you can go and say, I only want it to move when I've pressed down the key long enough. But there is a bit of a balance that you have to keep in mind, because the amount that it moves by, the speed that it moves by, is governed by the sensitivity of the seat. So each of these axes has a sensitivity slider, and this slider governs how quickly the number that is generated by the axis control moves. So if we're hitting, for example, the W key, it takes a while for it to get to 1. So if we have 0.1 as a gate, as soon as it hits that, as soon as it's greater than that, it will output the signal. But when it's at 1, it'll take a while to go back down below 0.1, at which point the gate will turn off. So setting this to 0.1 or setting it to 0.9 really depends on how you want it to act. Because either way, you're either getting a delay of it turning on or a delay turning off. So if you want to have somewhat in between, you would obviously go for something like 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, which is just in the middle of it not reacting when you're pressing the key and moving too long after you've released the key. You can, if you want to, change the sensitivity of the seed itself to more quickly go from its neutral position to either 1 or -1. However, you can't change the sensitivity back while you have your vehicle spawned. So if you have other controls that require a slower sensitivity, then you'll either have to adjust them or you have to adjust the seed and simply live with the fact that there is a small delay. Now, you can change the sensitivity of the up-down a little bit downwards to have it move less and be more responsive in that sense, but I have found that the easiest way to set these up is to keep them at somewhat of the median, meaning 0.5 for example, and keep the sensitivity of the up-down the same as the seat, which are both here set to 10%. That seems to be the easiest way for the player, for anyone, to kind of predict of how long you need to keep pressing the button for, how long it will continue to move after you've pressed the button, because obviously it'll take a while before it turns on, and it takes a while before it turns off, and you very quickly get used to that delay. Beyond that, if you want to have a very, very precise control, what you can do is you can turn these up-downs around and actually switch them on numerical switch boxes with a different sensitivity setting, or even use switch boxes for changing the way that these these numbers here react towards our less than and greater than gates. That can be done based on a very complex logic which would test against the seed generated number twice. You don't really need to do that unless you really need more precision in this system. There is other logic that you can use to turn this around. If your seed was a sticky control and you would like a control that is more in line of a reset, you would basically sort of reverse this logic towards that. But I've found that in most applications, it's best to keep the seed axis controls to reset and modulate using this logic to turn it into a sticky control.